Hey, peace to the family. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism, podcast and book club. I am Kimba, head writer, researcher. We Charge Colonialism, and I'll let the team introduce themselves.
Peace. Good morning, everyone. I am Natasha Robert. I'm an educator, activist, and community organizer.
Peace, everyone. This is Frank, host for the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series.
All right, and so we are your team. I'm excited. We're a trio today. You know, our schedule's been crazy, so we've been missing each other. But I'm excited to have this important discussion. We Charge Colonialism, a grassroots think tank, and of course, like part of our mission is to make sure that we put out information to counterbalance this colonial media, colonial education that's out there. So make sure that you like and share this podcast and book club so we can get as many Africans, Black people to be a part of these discussions and dialogue. Also, make sure you visit our website, wechargecolonialism.org. I just began the series of, which is going to be part of a series. I just published the first part of a series of articles that's going to be dealing with colonial education. So if you get an opportunity, make sure you go on our website and read that article. You know, as we always do, we like to start off with our weekly roundup and then transition into our book reading. And today we're going to be starting Dr. Amos Wilson's The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy. All right. And so, you know, I'm really excited. This is the first time we're really examining and covering Dr. Amos Wilson's work. He's one of our great thinkers, African thinkers of all time. And, you know, like I said, I'm just really looking forward to this. Now, anyone who wants to be a part of the continuing discussion and examination of this particular book, we are having, this is going to be a reading that we're going to be taking off of the podcast as well, and meeting on Sundays to discuss and examine this book in its entirety. If you're interested and want to be a part of that discussion, become a Patreon member. The book club is for members, WCC members and Patreon members. But you know, you can become a Patreon member today and support. This is a way to support We Charge Colonialism so we can continue doing this work. So with that being said, before we get into the reading, we'll do our weekly roundup. Natasha, we haven't seen you in a long time. I want to start off with you and your story. So what you have for us and the people?
Okay, so I'm gonna again. I sometimes have, you know, my issues sharing my screen, so I'm gonna work on sharing my screen right now. And actually, I think I should do a good job this time. Hopefully, so let's see.
I think it's present. They
yeah, and then I just have to figure out which screen it is coming from. Hold on. Allow. I have to choose which screens. Hold on. There's a little fox.
What my comrades doing that again, like and share the podcast, and book club. And peace to everybody that's out there. Bari Yaku, Bari Ghani, Uhuru, not Mani.
Okay, so let's see. The one that I want to share. Okay.
You see me, Frank, with my African tongue, man? I'm getting my African tongue back, bro.
I see it.
Let's get rid of this colonizer tongue. If you want, you can send it to me and I can share it.
I think it should be good. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. I'm just gonna skip this ad real quick. So everyone should be seeing my screen.
Yo. You're not seeing it.
It's down here. How does it go? Okay, there it is.
There we go. All right.
Yeah, I'm like, it's down here, but nothing's popping up. So let's just get rid of this ad. So we're gonna play this from the beginning. Just a little context. it says UAE government sentences Nigerian woman to prison over Twitter posts exposing racism. So this is a quick video, so I'll let it play, and then I'll give a little discussion or my thoughts on the whole issue.
Here is your African news update. Nigeria. UAE government sentenced Nigerian woman to 1 year in prison over Twitter posts on how Nigerians were illegally detained at a Dubai airport.
We have a human right. United Nations, if I say United Nations about this thing, it doesn't make sense. I have a human right. I used my visa before I came here. I used my money, I buy my ticket. I came to
Go
visit.
outside.
I'm not asking
Go
to stay. I
outside.
don't want to stay anymore.
Go outside.
I don't
They
want to
have
stay
to go
anymore.
outside. Say,
I don't
go
want to stay
outside.
anymore. I want to go
Go outside. Go
Go
outside.
That's what is happening right now. We are stranded in Dubai.
A Nigerian woman, identified as @Dunchichi on Twitter, has been reportedly sentenced to a 1 year jail term by the United Arab Emirates government for a social media post which the country deemed a cybercrime, showing how some Nigerian nationals were illegally detained at Dubai International Airport. On 31st August, Adunchichi posted on Twitter how she was detained together with other Nigerians despite processing a valid visa. Her post read, quote, "I'm at Dubai International Airport and myself and some other Nigerians with valid visas are being held in a room for hours after arriving with no explanation and no information on what we can do. Please help me. There's more than 20 of us," end quote. Under the UAE cybercrime law, taking a video or photograph of someone without his or her consent and posting such on social media is an offense punishable with 1 year jail term or a fine of between approximately 69,000 US dollars and 137,000 US dollars, or both jail term and fine. She was sentenced on October 12th and has 15 days to appeal the judgment. Her family plans to protest her conviction at the Dubai Consulate Office in Abuja. Thanks for watching. Please.
Okay, so I will stop my screen really quickly. So, yeah, what I thought, the reason why I wanted to bring this issue up in terms of what's happening around the world with African people and colonization is what struck me was what was deemed criminal, right? And the ability to then arrest this woman, and also the whole way of which the UAE was able to hold her and about, I think it's about like 20 other people or 19 other people within the airport without any just cause for any kind of reason. And so, when I think about this, I think about its connection to the police state and under colonialism, right? And the way in which they can create arbitrary reasons as to why they would want to hold and detain people, and also why they can go ahead and put people in prison. And and part of the reason, I guess, like maybe why this really struck me was, I've been reading a lot about abolition around, police and the police and the prison industrial complex, and how that is one of the arms that colonialism uses in order to control colonized people. And this anti-Blackness, this anti-Africanness that exists around the world. So here you have people from Nigeria going over into the UAE on a visa that they got legally, that they have, and for all intents and purposes, there should be no issues. But because of the anti-Africanness that comes out of colonialism, and that is still present in our current times under neocolonialism, we see this policing and also like this criminalization of whatever Black people, whatever African people do, under, whether it's in the UAE, but the way that it's happening in the UAE directly connects to the way that it happens in America and the way that it happens in other places around the world when African people are traveling, and what these countries are allowed to do, and whether or not they get help from their actual country. and from their actual people. And so I think this is when we see things like this, and we sometimes want to go to the UAE or we want to go to Dubai, we have to, think about these places when they're doing these types of things to our people. How do we make sure that we're showing support by, one, maybe not going there, not using our funds or our dollars to even go and visit those places, and two, by also, like they were mentioning in the video, supporting those who are protesting and getting the word out about this injustice and the criminalization of just African people in general. So I don't know if
Peace. Yeah. Appreciate you bringing the story. Yeah, had some technical difficulties, had to jump back on. But yeah, you had brought up something in regards to just law. And when we read the falsification of African consciousness, it's going to touch on that. But I think, like, when it comes to you mentioned, first of all, like living under colonial conditions, the colonizer is going to continue to create laws to be able to shape the behaviors of those people who are colonized. There's a certain way that we need to be thinking and behaving under colonialism for them to be able to maintain their control. And so that's why I'm appreciating also just like the reading of Dr. Amerson Wilson, because he deals with the psychology. Like these small forms, this is an individual who's about to be kidnapped and abducted and also charged as well in regards to just the fine. All of these different methods used to oppress this individual, but this is just representing a microcosm of what happens under colonialism, where now they're attacking this woman physically, and mentally, but also economically. And so this is a way to keep us, as a colonized people, as a permanent underclass. But at the end of the day, it is about control. And let's not make no mistake that these people, we're not talking about Europeans in this case, but these are people who are aligned with the international political regime, the international regime. And there's a lot of people who, are not, because we can't get caught up in thinking it's just like, white face. There's people who look just like us, who are from the Middle East, from Asia, China, who align themselves with the international regime that's dominated, yes, by the European powers in America. So we got to call out these contradictions. But appreciate the story though, because this is something that we should be discussing. How many more people are getting caught up like this that we don't know about? Right. But Frank, I don't know if you wanted to add something as well to this.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that quick, the thing here is, as African people, we have this stigma that we are carrying along with, and the stigma here is a stigma of enslavement, and thing we should all bear in mind. The Arab was the first to enslave African people before the European or the West or the United States. So that stigma is within us. No matter how or where we go, people are going to identify us just based on that stigma. And also, we should bear in mind that nations that took part in the enslavement of African people, they all once they all view African the same. So if they see how America treat Black people, if they see how the European treat Black people, they're going to use that same formality to treat Black people, to send their message to Black people. So they all have a taste of enslaving African people, and they all benefited from enslaving African people. So they don't really care what African people have been through. So with that stigma, it is a stigma that it is only we African can heal or take that stigma from all us. And the fact that they all don't want to see African to resist them, or African to rise up. All nations that took part in the colonization of African people, in the enslavement of African people, they all have that same mindset that they don't want to see African people to rise up, and they don't want to be exposed. So it is all, games that they all play. So even though what they were doing down there, it was never right. But again, these were folks that was there, and that was their business, because if they wasn't going to recall it and it go to a length, and which of course have come to that point where they have imprisoned them. So it is only that recalling actually can save them, because they have a proven document, they have valid document. So why were they maltreated? Why were they ill-treated? So it is only that video that can prove them innocent, or that can take them from court if they go to court, which of course have come to that far. But again, they're going to use again their colonial policy or laws that they have in there, that you can't record a person on there, you have a consent. But again, that is a public place. I do not have to seek your consent before I can record you if it is in a public place. And that's, again, they all have the same mindset.
Yeah, peace, family. If people are, I know at least one person said that they can't hear, but someone said that they can. But throw something in the chat, whatever. It may be a technical issue on Nkrumah's end, but yeah, appreciate you, Frank, adding on. And I'm having I'm having technical issues, so I'm having trouble as well hearing. But at least you guys can hear me. But we're gonna move on to the next story. Frank, you Nigeria. We still sort of in the realm of what's taking place in Nigeria. So I want you to do your story next.
The next story,
and then I'll add on. Yeah.
The next story here is Nigeria, which of course I know we already touched on it, but let me put it out here. It just, again, regarding the colonizer. Hopefully they shouldn't tell me my time is out. All right. So just what Natasha reported is almost the same as what went on here. So a few weeks ago, that was on the 28th of October, the United States, let's say the U.S. ordered family of embassy employees to depart Nigeria due to a heightening rates of tourism. So it says, let me just read a little bit here. So it says, the State Department has ordered non-emergency U.S. embassy employee and their family member in Abuja, Nigeria, to leave the country due to heightening rates of terrorist attack there. The department also issued a level 3. The department also issued a level 3 travel advisory for the entire country, urging reconsider travel to Nigeria due to crime, terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, and maritime crime. So let me just stop here. Okay, let me just stop here. Let me see. Let me take this out here. So this was a report given by the United States government for the U.S. resident in Nigeria. And it was not just in Nigeria, it was in South Africa. And all these things, or this announcement came about recently, as I don't know if people have been noticing, the African nations, for some reason, they have, I would say, ignore the West a little bit, and they began to take matter into their hands to solve peace and reconciliation on the African continent. And recently, we have seen the AU, or the African nation, that summoned to South Africa to talk about a peace agreement in Ethiopia between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray, rebel forces that have been backed, by support of the United States. Okay, so, and a lot of things have been happening on the African continent where the African leaders have been ignoring the West. And the very first time that they have been trying to ignore the West. And not only that, but we have also seen to some reality that African people are even holding on their resources, are backing off from being dictated from the West. And because of all of these things been happening, America have come out, and which of course it is a tactic, that's what they've been doing, to put fear into people. Okay, as we all know, In Nigeria, Boko Haram have been there for so long, and American citizens have been going on coming by. As we all know, crime rate is all over in the world. I'm not saying Nigeria does not have crime, but Nigeria been having crime just like the United States have crime in all of its 50 states. America have not come out to say, oh, we don't want U.S. citizens to travel to Nigeria and so forth. Terrorist attacks and activities have been going on in Nigeria for so long. America have not come out and say, oh, don't go there because there is terrorist things. But the moment African people become to back up and say no from America or from the West, that's the time they come up with terrorists. So first of all, how did America come to understand or come to know that terrorist activity is going to take place, crime activity is going to take place, and so forth, and all of those things, or bombing going to take place in more, in government places, or in private places, and all of those things. How did they know? How did they get that information when Nigeria have a security system, when South Africa have a security system? So, and that's why the Ramaphosa came out the last time and said, how did America know that these things will happen when we have our security system? We don't even know. So if America know about these things, why America did not communicate with our security system first before coming out saying these things? Why America is not working with us when they hear information like this? So it's the same thing they do to Nigeria. So they put fear in us, right? So what I want to conclude here is, I believe the United States is coordinating or in communication with those terrorists that is saying that are going to happen.
Hey, peace. Appreciate you bringing this story. I couldn't, again, I'm having technical issues. I didn't hear a lot, but I know you were like raising the point though of America, maybe not necessarily colluding with the terrorists, but they know what's happening in Nigeria. This is what I'm making up, but they making out in regards to what you were saying. They know what's happening. They have intel of what's taking place in Nigeria in regards to the terrorist attack, quote unquote, like terrorist attacks that are taking place. Are you raising that they're colluding, or they're just like aware of what's happening?
No, it's not colluding. I mean, it is an announcement that it came out with, telling their citizens not to travel and telling their citizens to leave. They are withdrawing their citizens. They are taking their citizens out of the country, to the extent that they are telling embassy employees to leave the country. So that tells you they have guaranteed information. How did they get that information? To the extent that you are repatriating your citizen. And whereas the authority in the country, the government of the country do not know anything like that. The security system do not know anything like that. So if America knows something like that, and America have, let's say, bilateral, because that's what they say, if you have a bilateral agreement with Nigeria and you have such information, okay, why can't you communicate with the Nigerian authority or with the Nigerian?
Oh, so I can jump in here.
Yeah, because that's your crucial information to have, and then hide it and don't tell the Nigerian people. So is the United States telling us that they want to keep the information so that terrorists can come and kill Nigerians? Because those are some of the things that you need. I mean, don't hide it. Give it to the citizen. Give it to the the Nigerian government so that the security can be on alert.
If I can just jump in and add to what Frank is saying in terms of his analysis of this statement that's been put out, right? This warning to have American citizens, leave Nigeria under threat of terrorism. And I think to the point that you bring up, Frank, it makes me think about terrorism that has happened in America, right? So the fact that many terrorist attacks that happened, like for example, 9/11, when you think about it, and people were always just like, okay, well, how come the United States, didn't catch this? How is it that they didn't know this was going to happen? How could they not have prevented this terrorist attack? And I think that that's in line with, I think your critique of this whole statement that if you're American, and for some reason you've gotten this intel that the Nigerian government does not have, why not share it with the Nigerian, with the government of Nigeria? And also, how is it that you have all of these holes within figuring out terrorist attacks within your own country, but for some reason your intel for terrorist attacks in another country is apparently so on point that you can really catch it in another country, but you have difficulty catching it within your own country in terms of what's about to happen. And so I think that point raises, the question of this whole idea of terrorism and where, terrorism stems from, right? How is it funded? How are these terrorist groups funded? How are they getting, access to information? And there's always so much when it comes to whether they're rebel groups in a country, whether they're terrorist groups in a country that has a history of, European meddling or Western meddling within the affairs of that country, and how they use their intel, the CIA, the FBI, to go into country, how they have historically used it to go into these countries and help to destabilize them, and how they have access to intel that are within countries that even countries don't even know. And so I think it's important for us, when we're thinking about these specific types of things, to really call back to history, what we know about the legacy of U.S. and other European collusion behind rebel groups, behind terrorist groups within other countries, whether it's in, South America or on the continent of Africa, when they want to really make sure that these colonial countries, or these, countries that have been colonized and are under neocolonialism, remain in the position that they can be forever under the influence of Western powers. So I think, that it brings up the fact that we have to look at the history, and we always have to think about the history when we think about these things, to really analyze what's going on right now in terms of, for this example that you brought up, Frank.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just to add to that, in the article I just read, if you read further down, they even name places that the terrorist attack will take place. They name all those places. Like, how they got all those information that these are the places that is going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, for you to have that level of detail and intel, we have to question it. We have to, figure out where is this stemming from, specifically because of the history of the United States involvement in clandestine activities in other countries, guerrilla groups, terrorist groups.
Okay, so y'all know I missed a lot of that discussion. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. I think there's a delay, at least on my end, but we're going to work through this. But appreciate you raising this story. And when it comes to the colonizer, we can't put nothing past the colonizer. Do is disrupt and cause chaos within the colony. So but appreciate you raising this. I'm going to transition to the book reading rather than do my story. I'll save my story for next week just for the sake of time. And again, for all those people who are joining us or just joined us, we're reading The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy by Dr. Amerson Wilson. There should be a link for you guys to be able to click on and read along with us. This is going to be an important read and examination right here. So we'll get into it, but make sure that you like and share the podcast, though. Make sure you like and share. Also, a second, like, share, get as many people to join this discussion. And for those people who want to continue the discussion online, be a part of the WCC Tron discussion of this book as we continue to go further into this reading, make sure you become a Patreon member. We have a link for you to click on, join, and become a Patreon member today. Also, just a couple of other things too. Today, there's Curb Fest going on in Boston. I just wanted to highlight that, the great work that's being done by the organizers who put on this particular event to raise awareness for political prisoners, free Mumia, of course, free Shakur, and free them all. So, if you're in the Boston area, make sure that you check for Curb Fest in Boston. Also down in DC, Black is Back Coalition this weekend is having a conference, a march and a conference. Black is Back is a coalition of organizations that's fighting around these issues, the reparations, the right for self-determination, and etc. So Black is Back Coalition down in DC this weekend. So look into that and find out exactly where they're going to be at. So with that being said, we'll start from the introductions, page 1. And we'll throw it up on my screen. Again, having issues with the computer. So we're starting from page 1 in the introduction. The psychology, consciousness, and behavioral tendencies. Say that again.
I was going to say, Brother Akim, but you said you were going to throw it up on the screen.
Yeah. Well, I'm not using my computer. I have a technical problem, so I can't.
I can throw it up on my screen. I have it open. So I'm gonna just go ahead and share that. It should be up onto the screen in just a sec. There it is.
For any white people, we don't mean literally throw it up on the screen. I'm just joking. All right, so the psychology, consciousness, and behavioral tendencies of individuals and societies are to a very significant extent the products of their collective histories. Both personal and collective psychology are constructed from those experiences which can consciously retrieve. Which can be consciously retrieved from memory, as well as those experiences which have been forgotten or represented, but which still represent themselves in individual and collective habits, tendencies, traditions, emotional responsivities, perspectives, ways of processing information, attitudes, and reflex-like reactions to certain stimuli and situations. Both types of experiences interacting with current perceptions are utilized by individuals and groups to achieve certain material and non-material ends. The psychology of individuals and groups may also, in part, be constructed from historical and experiential amnesia. That is, when an individual or a group is compelled by various circumstances to repress important segments of his or its formative history, he or it at the same time loses access to crucially important social, intellectual, and technical skills associated with that history, which could be used to resolve current problems. Consequently, to some lesser degree, the individual group handicapped or disadvantaged by the resulting amnesia. Finally, individual and group psychology are in part constructed from the perception he or it has of his or its history, the inferences drawn from that history about the kind of person or group he or it may be, what other persons or groups think of him or it, and the destiny that awaits him or it. The character of individual and collective consciousness, and the range of their behavioral possibilities are, I think that's supposed to say, are very significantly influenced by the quality of their recordings and recollections of their historical experiences. To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. To manipulate consciousness is to manipulate abilities, and to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. I'll read the next paragraph and then we can build on that. Herein lies the mortal threat of Eurocentric historiography to African existence. For what must be the form and functionality of African consciousness and behavior, they are a derivative of an African history written by their oppressors. history of the oppressed, as written by their oppressors, shape the consciousness and psychology of both oppressed and oppressor. It helps to legitimate the oppressive system and to maintain the imbalance of power in favor of the oppressor. Eurocentric history is an exercise in publishing knowledge for the European oppression of African peoples, often a gross and crude attempt to create and shape a subordinate and inferior African consciousness and psychology. It seeks to impose a social, historical, cultural, amnestic tax on the heads of African peoples and thereby rob them of their most valuable resources, knowledge of truth and reality of self, their cultural heritage and identity, minds, bodies, and souls, their wealth, lands, products of their labor and lives. Eurocentric historiography is the most formidable racism and imperialism. Its treacherous role in this regard must be explored in reverse by an African-centered historiography written by African historians dedicated to the historical accuracy and truth. Historians who are unafraid to speak truth to power. It's like every paragraph I was reading, I was like, I want to keep going. Because he's raising like so many important points and he's just like hitting the nail on the hammer. But I think like, yeah, just like starting off though, you know, Dr. Amerson Wilson is making some big points in each of these paragraphs in regards to just like he talks about experiences and how our psychology and consciousness is impacted by our perception of these experiences, you know. So even like real, you know, lived experiences, like those experiences that impact us subconsciously, because he says both personal, in the first paragraph, both personal and collective conscious psychology are constructed from those experiences which can be consciously retrieved from memory, as well as those experiences which have been forgotten or repressed, but which still represent themselves in individual and collective habits, tendencies, traditions, emotional responses, and so forth. And so, like, even when you think about the African experience in the Americas and how the European attempted to strip everything from us through indoctrination, there's this certain retention that we do have as Africans in regards to our history and our culture, even if it's subconsciously, showing up in our lives. But I think it's important too, because in regards to what he's getting at, and when he's making the point that those experiences and that history can be manipulated by the colonizer as well. And part of his argument is like this manipulation serves the purpose of the colonizer. You know, it's to get us to behave in a particular way based off of a false consciousness. But you know, if any of y'all wanted to build on that too, because there's another point I want to get to, but I don't want to go too far away from it. Did y'all have any thoughts at all?
I think definitely this connects to, when we're talking about how the manipulation of African consciousness, has a direct effect on our tendencies, on our actions, and the things we do. And I think that it connects to this point that he makes here, where it says to manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness, and to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities, and to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. And so I think when we're talking about how this, Eurocentric historiography affects the ways in which we behave and the things that we do as individuals and as groups, it directly goes back to this idea of power and people and African people thinking about power and how they see and think about power and how they operate and use how we operate and use our own power, or how we feel as if we have or as how we feel that we have a lack of power. And so I think that connects back again to this idea of, how the Eurocentric historiography affects the ways in which we act. Because I think power, you demonstrate your power within, or your idea, or how you feel about how much or how little power you have based on what you do.
Yeah, just to add to that, Dr. Wilson. Wait, I'm hearing myself.
I can hear you, Frank.
Yeah, I'm hearing like echo back. Yeah, hearing myself again. But yeah, I
Let
don't
me
know what's
mute.
going on. But just to add to that, Dr. Wilson, like I mean, every paragraph that we read here, like I mean, he just I don't know, it have like valuable information that he wrote almost like a prophet, but he wrote it in a way that, and let me just get to it. For the first paragraph there, when he talked about individual or personal and collective, how do you call it, and collectivism, as I'll put it, and retreating what we have forgotten. Basically, I think when he was writing this book, he was just looking at how African people are being scattered around the world, that African are left Africa and came to the so-called New World. At some point, they lost their culture, they lost their history, their heritage, they lost it at some point. But again, at some point down the line, before it got missing, there was also oral information that was passed on to some generation down the line that still remember it. Now, those African that are just leaving the African continent right now, that are coming to the so-called New World as well, also able to connect. And as they connect, and as they begin to narrate their story, somehow they will remember that, oh yeah, I can remember, I haven't been to Africa, but my great-grandfather said this to my mother, and my mother said this to me. And that's how they retreat, information, and that's how they retreat their culture, that's how they retreat, their identity and so forth and things. And these are some of the things that he was talking about. And as we do that, we become to unite, and we become to come together. So he was just saying how we African can regain our collectiveness, can regain what we have lost. And it also come about dialogue again, communicating with each other, dialoguing with each other, and things, and bringing knowledge, bringing ideology. What do you know? Bringing it, and that's how we can regain our culture and our existence.
Just to build on top of what y'all was saying, and Natasha, you were making a point in regards to just power, and you went to the top of page 2, and he's talking about manipulating history, and it brought me back to even like my own experiences in regards to coming into consciousness and having a different understanding of Black history, African history, right? And I never before I came into consciousness and began to gain the knowledge of self, I made no connection with Africa, like myself in Africa. Like I literally had no connection to Africa and African people. And then I began to learn more about that history, the transatlantic slave trade, and the heritage that I have Africa in regards to things that we built, things that we were doing, what we contributed to civilization. And so I began to develop in who I was, but it wasn't just me learning about my history and it was also about that exploited African people. And so, learning about this history, understanding of history, I became more aware. And so, going back to this, to what he's saying, to manipulate consciousness, our awareness, and to manipulate our awareness and consciousness is to manipulate our possibilities. And so, again, like understanding what needs to be done and what we do as African people Buffalo for that history knowing. And so this is why this is important, but this is important for the colonizer to be able to control and manipulate these things. So let me read further. I think we might be able to at least get through the introduction. I'm at the bottom of page 2 for those who's just joining. The Clarion call for the writing of a restorative African-centered historiography, a critical undertaking, is a call for the healing of the wounds of African peoples, for African unity, for the freeing and expansion of African consciousness, for the reconquest of African minds, bodies, lands, resources, and African autonomy. Every Eurocentric social institution conspires with Eurocentric historiography to handcuff and incarcerate African consciousness, to justify and facilitate the subordination and exploitation of African people. One such institution is the Eurocentric mental health establishment. A product and functionary of European imperialism, this establishment promulgates explanatory systems, diagnostic techniques, labeling and treatment regimes, which obscure the true origins of African mental diseases and maladaptiveness, the effects and after effects of white supremacy. By these means, this makes its most important contribution, along with Eurocentric historiography, in this direction of African conscious and behavior. The context of a racist social system, psychological diagnosis, labeling, and treatment of the behavior of politically oppressed persons are political acts performed to attain political ends. This goes to the name. Everything is politics. That's in the chat. For oppression begins as a psychological fact and is in good part a psychological state. If oppression is to operate with maximum efficiency, it must become and remain a psychological condition, achieving self-perpetuation by its own internal dynamics and by its own inertia momentum. The Eurocentric mental health establishment, a beneficiary of the white domination of African peoples, is a very important cog in this self-perpetuating machine. Its reason for being is to nurture and sanction the imperialist and racist regime which fathered it. Thus, its explanatory systems and its treatment approaches ultimately must be exposed as political ideology and oppressive political governance, parading as empirically validating principles of psychological and medical science, and as objective psychotherapeutic and psychiatric practices. The Eurocentric mental health establishment consequently provide adequate explanations, rationales, preventative, and remedial practices for African peoples whose psychology is derivative of a singularly unique history and cultural experience and of a necessarily revolution to achieve liberation from subordination. Let me go. Let's build on that. Forget it, because there was a lot said, man. I think like the important thing for me that I took away from this in regards to like the colonizer not being able to develop solutions for African people. For one, that they're in the solutions for African people from the system. The colonizer wants to uphold the system. He wants to maintain the status quo. But also when it comes to the diagnosis in regards to mental health and mental disease of colonized people, will never be an indictment on the system. It's always going to be an indictment on the individual. It's something personally wrong with this person, with this individual, that they have to resolve. And so the remedies they come up with is to try to get the colonizer to adjust to a system that's driving them in. How do we get this person to be content, content or these are the solutions that we develop in mental health field. So and I think like that's what he's exposing right here. It's just going to this second paragraph. If I could read that one more time. In the context of a racist social system, psychological diagnosis, labeling, and behavior of politically oppressed persons are political acts performed to attain political ends. like right there, I think like that kind of sums up where he's getting at. Everything's politics, as the name of one of the people in the chat. This serves the end when it comes to the colonial institutions, educational institutions, mental health institutions. Is not the nationalism. Is how do we socialize people and get them to adjust to this system of oppression and exploitation. But if you guys have any thoughts, go right ahead.
One thing before I add on a little bit, what you just said in terms of how do we socialize people makes me think about how just like this American society, and I'm speaking specifically about America, because I know a little bit more about exactly what it feels like in terms of the ideas that are spread around socialization. And I feel like that there's this idea around the fact that socialization happens by society, that societies socialize their people in specific ways, right? And so when we're talking about helping African people regain their consciousness, socializing them into a way of thinking that reclaims their history, their actual history and memory. People talk about it as indoctrination, or like what we're trying to do is indoctrinate people, or put this negative connotation on socialization, where when you understand socialization and you understand that all societies, all nations socialize their people as to what's going to help that society sustain itself and recreate itself. And so, I just wanted to point that out in terms of socialization, because I think, that's one of the things that people always try to shy away from African consciousness, or even any type of critique of this system, which is, you guys are indoctrinating people, or you're trying to get people to think this way. That is what a society does. All societies do it in order to protect themselves, ensure themselves, and ensure, the recreation of themselves. And in doing that, this society tries to hide the fact that, we are being socialized and indoctrinated into what is going to sustain white supremacy and colonialism and settler colonialism. And so one of the things that it goes to, and goes back to your point, Akimba, and connects to something else that he said down here when he says that the Eurocentric health establishment consequently cannot provide adequate explanations, rationales, preventative and remedial practices for African peoples whose psychology is the root of a singular, unique history and cultural experience. And so when you see, for example, one of the things that I thought about was the rise in suicide amongst Black people, particularly amongst, Black men, young Black men. And so how, America frames it, and how this society frames that, and just frames this suicide in general. But when we know, particularly looking at African people not being able to really provide any explanations or rationales that are, or anything preventative to really address this, because of the fact that we're in such a Eurocentric colonial society that is not allowing you to actually really see as we said before, what the actual possibilities are, and what the actual treatments are, to be able to look and see, okay, why is it that this is that this suicide is that the suicide is rising, that the suicide rates are rising amongst Black people, in particular Black males. And it goes back to this falsification of the consciousness in the psychology that is, Eurocentric led. So yeah, that's what I wanted to just add.
You can say, just add real quick too. I was going to speak. Did my screen pause? I was going to say, someone speaking, but this system point, like it's perpetuates itself through the education. Like those people who are supposed to be people who've been educated through the colonial system, the colonial school system. There's a certain framework that they're using that has been developed by these colonial institutions, the scholars, those academics who's published articles, all of these people that they are using to develop solutions to mental health problems in particular that he's bringing up here. These people are not indicting the system of colonialism. I mean, just sitting down in front of this health professional and the psychologist or psychiatrist is telling you, like, it's not you, it's the colonial structure that's causing, the problems that you are dealing with. You're dealing with the poverty and racism, going to your job and being exploited at your job, and this idea of what it means to be successful. All of these things are playing into why you're dealing with these mental health issues and you're feeling depressed, or the trauma that's being caused by this system, that's creating the post-traumatic what is it, syndrome, or stress disorder that many of you are dealing with as a result of the colonial system. And so, you'll never sit in front of a therapist and they'll explain that to you, right? Because they, going back paragraph, what's the third paragraph? It says the Eurocentric mental health establishment is a beneficiary of the white domination of African people, is a very important cog in the self-perpetuating. But I know, Frank, you wanted to build.
Yeah, let me just add to that. I'm glad that he started. I'm glad that he started the book with saying by psychiatry or psychology. What I got from that is that when he says African consciousness or and those things, and whenever you say I am a conscious African, what he also tried to put in a book for to understand, when you are a conscious African, that means that you are no longer in a position or that power to carry on the narrative of the oppressor, because once you do that, you will still be a dominant, they will still have a dominant thought over your ideology. So you cannot be a conscious African and then you still hold the narrative of the oppressor. You still hold the interpretation of the colonizer, and that is why he's talking about here. Once you do that, you are mentally ill and you have a mental problem, because the narrative of the oppressor is to oppress you, is to dehumanize you, is to put you at the bottom of society, as I also saw in the chat. So once you do that, you are mentally ill. You are not sound. You have some problem. And those are the kind of people we have in our society today who think that they know Black issue, they know African issue, and those are the people the oppressor always use to come on social media, as we have seen recently, even in the NBA, people are coming criticizing Karen Irving. Those are the kind of people who are mentally ill because they think they know Black issue, and they come out to talk about how Black people need to be obedient to the system, the same system that dehumanizes them. You cannot be an obedient element to a system that dehumanizes you. In that, you are mentally ill.
Hey, that's a great point. Dr. Emerson Wilson talks about that too. Like, we have to literally be out of our minds for the colonizer, for minority people, Europeans, to be able to dominate the majority of African and other, oppressed people around the world. Like, we have to literally be out of our minds, and that goes back to them creating this mental illness. And what does it mean, for someone to be mentally ill or maladjusted? You know what I'm saying? Who's defining that? And so these are questions that we have to ask ourselves, because there's a lot of people who are walking around who are deemed fit for society, going to the point that you raised, is really dealing with a mental illness as they're waking up every day as if this society, this relationship that we have as African people with the colonizer is a normal relationship. It's healthy, and it's not doing anything to try to dismantle the system that is causing misery to billions of people across the planet. I think too, like just a question. I know we're sort of at time. That question was this. So Miss Hattie said, "What's the difference between race struggle and class struggle?" She had a conversation with some Argentines who said the country does not have racism but caste. And I think that's an important a question and thing for us to tackle too as African people, because there's a lot of dealing colonial within their borders, and they're not necessarily dealing with Europeans directly, right? I think, like, for me, when you're dealing with a race struggle, that isn't necessarily overturning the system that's causing the oppression and exploitation of Africa. I think what it does sort of blind us that there are people that look just like us, that are in positions that are exploiting and oppressing African people. So when we're dealing with neocolonialism, what does neocolonialism have to do with race? And so if we get caught up in a race struggle rather than, a struggle for control of our resources, no matter who you are, if you're against the African liberation movement, you're an enemy. It's not necessarily, just white people. It can be Chinese people, Indian people, and the people who are in our very community that's aligning themselves with these other groups. So I think, like, that's the difference right there. When we're dealing with class, we're dealing with resources, material conditions, us overturning a relationship, those people who control those resources, those people who represent the majority of people who are part of the working class, them wanting to gain control of those resources. So I think, like, that's different. I don't know if y'all wanted to add something to that, but I think that's a
I definitely want to
difference
add
right
a little something to it. I think that, and before I was going to pull up the, image of Argentina just for some reference, and, us remembering exactly where Argentina is as part of South America. And I think that one of the things we have to remember is that, as we were talking about before with the UAE, this anti-Africanness, this anti-blackness is in a lot of places around the world, because a lot of the places around the world have been colonized by Europeans. And so what I know Latin America likes to do a lot of the times is say they don't have a race problem. They don't have racism there because, everybody in Latin America, is Latino, and pretend as if though they do not take race into account, which they really do. And so if we even think back to history, when we think about the Latin American liberations and, the fact that they maintain the same caste systems based on race, based on you being African, based on you being native, based on you being a European that's born there, it absolutely has to do with racism. And I think that it's almost hard for us to, and we almost can't, because they're so intertwined, separate race and caste, because that is the foundation of colonialism, of settler colonialism, wherever they went, was to create these castes based on race. And so Latin America is no different than, what happens in Latin America is also no different than what happens in America. They may call it something different, but ultimately they're doing the same thing. And so I think a lot of the times Latin American countries would like to pretend that there's no racism going on there, but there certainly is.
First, I will add to what you both
Argentina
said.
is mostly colonizer too.
Yeah. I will add to what both of you guys said, and also in reference to the question. So first of all, I would say they have similarity in the first area that I'm going to talk about, and both of them have to do with dominant. Okay, and that just go to the example of Argentina. Now, the reason why Argentina went ahead to slaughter or to exterminate or most of a black population, it have to do with dominant. Okay, because here it is, the black race, it is the only race in the world that have the capability of dominating other race. You can have how to call it, you can procreate with a black female and the baby will become black. You can procreate with a white how to call it, with a black male, and the baby will become black. So in itself, right, if a white person procreate with black people, you're going to have a dominant race. You're going to how to call it, create black people more and more. So in Argentina, with the number of black population that were there, in order to eliminate black dominant, you have to get rid of them, okay, so that you can only find white people or mixed people to mix with other people like Argentina, that I don't want to call them white, so that you can have their kind. So in order to have their kind, you have to eliminate the black, and that is why they did. So both of them have the power, how to call it, the dominant power to dominate one another, right? Now, with the class struggle, it also do with how to call it a power as well, because with class struggle, it gives distinction between who is at certain class or who is within a class. And black people, we are dealing with both of them. We are dealing with the race struggle and the power struggle, or which is, I would say, the class struggle. Okay, so in America here, for example, at this point of time, you can see the population of Caucasian is decreasing, and they are asking them, to get breath and so forth and things, right? Now, why you think in the United States here, okay, it was designed, and people going are telling black people that, I can give you, how to call it, how to call these things, I can give you drugs. Let me just put it out because it's not coming. I can give you drugs so that it will eliminate the time of procreating, so that you can't get breath, so that you can't get pregnant, and those things, right? So it is all by design. Yeah. How to family planning and all of those things. So instead of them taking the model of what Argentina did by killing black people, assassinating black people, they don't want to do it that way, right? But the United States came in a way with family planning or Planned Parenthood and those things, and deliberately they targeted black people. Okay, so you don't want for black people to increase in number to get breath. So both of them have, black people are suffering, are struggling with them. Now, if black people rise up again to become part of the class, which of course today we are still struggling. Now, once you become part of that class, it gives you the edge of the opportunity, right, to fight for black issue. Now, to fight for black issue, right, and things affecting black people. So they don't want you to be in our class. And once they see you get into that class and talking about black issue and black struggle, right, they try to put you from that class back down to the race. Okay, so they began to identify you again in our race struggle or in our race category to put you down there. So we are fighting with both of them all around the world. I think that's how I look at it. So all have to deal with dominant, all have to do with power.
Okay. Like let me ask this question too, though. Like, because when I look at the struggle, when we talk the race struggle, and even a class struggle, you know, particularly like, you know, when it comes to race and it being a fight, you know, if there's a struggle that's take place, it seems more of an internal struggle, at least for me, rather than, you know, a struggle of, and it turns into a struggle of trying to, uh, I guess, like change the, like reform people within, you know, a racist system to be able to build or interact with those people within the system, you know, of colonialism, rather than, you know, trying to capture the economy and separate ourselves from a system that is dominated by people who you know, uses race as a pretext to exploit and oppress people.
Yeah,
And so,
Brian Cuba.
you know, for me, say that.
Yes, sorry to cut you out. Sorry to cut you out, but I want to answer a question here, which is very, very important. I don't want to leave it out. There's a question here. It says, I don't know about that, Frank. Have you seen Meghan Markle? So this Meghan Markle, first of all, let me make things clear here. It is the lady that married to the Prince of England. That's a lady, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good. That's why I didn't want to leave it out. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, I love this question. Now, this is what exactly Dr. Emma Wilson is talking about. Okay, and he said, as African people, we are going to remain oppressed, right? If we take the narrative of the oppressor, if we take the narrative, right, of the imperialist, if we take the narrative of the colonizer, we are going to remain oppressed. And in that manner, we are mentally sick. Now, Meghan Markle is just one person. So are we going to say because she married a white man or a prince, then the issue of black people have been solved, then the issue of race struggle have been solved? Absolutely not. And first of all, let me tell you this. The reason why that happened, it was by design, okay? To make African people think that things are okay now. White people, you know, have come to realize black struggle, okay? So that they can take the African resources and give it back to the Queen of England. I mean, you have to go beyond to understand what in the first place that happened, okay? While she's even being disrespected in the house, a lot of meetings, they cannot allow her to go there. Even dinner, they cannot allow her to go there, to the extent her husband cannot attend some of the program they have because of this black woman. It was by design to make African people think that everything is okay now because a prince have married a black woman. It was by design. So because the prince married a black woman, that doesn't mean it has solved the issue of what we're discussing here when it comes to race struggle.
Shay, we're gonna have a topic. We're gonna have to make this a topic. I think we want to build on this more, because at the end of the day, like I feel, you know, you know, the ideas of race, black, you know, white, all of that, you know, that was structured. You know, these things were structured under the system of colonial capitalism. You know, they developing almost simultaneously, you can say, but you know, I'm the belief that colonial capitalism, which was the system that even, you know, goes back before the 1500s, before the transatlantic, you know, slave trade, as that developed, and they come in contact with people, there's going to be different constructs to justify it. You know, these people are non-Christian, you know, that's used as a justification for the oppression and exploitation of people. You know, oh, these people have darker skin, you know, they have curlier hair, you know, curly hair, you know, they brown eyes, whatever. Like there's going to be something that's going to be used to make this distinction between people to justify what people are really struggling over, which is control over resources, you know, to be able to survive. And so, as African people, I think like there has to be this focus on capturing control over the economy, regardless of who we're struggling against, but the masses of people to sort of to rid ourselves of an exploitative system that we're all a part of. And so, it those people come in just different, shades to me, but we could build on this further. I know we're a little behind. I want to appreciate everybody though for tuning in to the podcast and book club. We here every Saturday, at 10 a.m. For those people who want to continue this discussion, become a Patreon member as well. We have these discussions offline with WC members and Patreon members. And this is a way that we can get folks to support us so we can continue to do this work. And go on our website, wechargecolonialism.org, check our latest article that I put up, which is sort of an introduction to a series of articles that's going to be dealing with colonial education, which is used. This is used. It's a method used to sustain the